It is your Classic Metal Show right here on the ClassicMetalShow.com. That is Legendry. I believe I said that right. And that comes from their latest release called The Wizard and the Tower Keeper, and that's called The Lost Road. And a guy who seems to know where he's going with this band is the lead vocalist and founder of the band, Vidarr. What's going on there, Vidarr?
Oh, not too much.
Not too much. I would think you were out there slaying dragons and conjuring up spells and taking on the wizards, and I would think that'd be a full-time job.
Yeah, well, that's a given. Of course, I've been doing that. But
well, I got to tell you, I'm a Pittsburgh guy myself, and you guys hail out of Pittsburgh. And where about in the Pittsburgh area are you guys from?
Well, the tag of being from Pittsburgh. I mean, I'm from Pittsburgh myself. I'm living in actually just west of Pittsburgh in Weirton, West Virginia.
All right.
And the rest of the band lives in Newcastle, Pennsylvania.
Okay, so I'm very familiar with both of those places.
Yeah.
So you guys, you guys are from a very blue collar area that loves their metal. They love their heavy rock, and you guys are bringing the music to the masses.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, I got to ask you, Vidarr. I've checked out your release, The Wizard and the Tower Keeper, and I've kind of explored you a little bit, and I'm always interested in people from the Pittsburgh area, as I lived in Irwin myself, and I like to know what's going on out there, and I see you guys are very heavily influenced with the whole demons and wizards and dragons and all that kind of stuff. So what is your main interest? How did you come to a conclusion that, hey, I need to form a band that celebrates that kind of mythology?
Well, I mean, I've been interested in the swords and sorcery fantasy sort of stuff since I was a young kid, and always been into rock and roll and heavy metal music, and actually when I was a little kid I was really into Deep Purple and of course the early Metallica albums and things like that, and then I discovered that power metal existed, and I think I was maybe 11 or 12 when I picked up my first Hammerfall album, and then got into Blind Guardian and Manowar and that kind of music, which then gradually led way into black metal, also the type of black metal that focuses more on the medieval aspects of metal. But with Legendry, the whole genesis of it really comes about from, getting heavily into the band Manila Road. I'm not sure if you're familiar with those guys, but they kind of they encapsulated this different aspect of swords and sorcery, not just the kind of double bass drum gallop sort of Euro power metal style, but it was a more down to earth sort of style. I mean, if you were to compare the high fantasy of Lord of the Rings to the barbaric fantasy of Conan. And so with Manila Road, getting into the short stories and novellas of Robert E. Howard was actually a big inspiration as well for the lyrics, starting out. So yeah, essentially, I based a lot of the early lyrics off of, short stories by Robert E. Howard and that sort of Manila Road-esque style of epic metal, as they called it, and as we like to call the band, and so from that point, basing it off of his stories, I then kind of took it a step further with The Wizard and the Tower Keep, and wrote my own short story to base everything off of. So that's where we kind of end up with it.
Right. Well, let me ask you something, and I'm not saying this in a critical form. I'm asking this just out of genuine curiosity. When you have a band that focuses so much on a very niche subject material, do you believe you're pigeonholing yourself to a very a limited audience because, obviously not everyone is into the whole dragons and wizards and stuff.
Right.
I personally am a big Hammerfall fan. I love Hammerfall. I've been a fan for many, many years. But when you focus specifically on one thing like that, it kind of limits you. Do you see a way of, expanding your horizons because of, you're into your second or third release now, but you're kind of like really putting a stamp on who you guys are. So, people who may not have an interest in that subject material may not discover the band because it's like, I'm really not into that whole medieval thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's definitely a niche sort of genre, niche sort of audience would appreciate it, but it's it's not something that really bothers me or us in a way. I mean, I like niche sort of styles of music. I definitely get into a lot of obscure bands and kind of forgotten, styles and things like that. And so, is it pigeonholing? Yes, maybe, but all the same, though, I feel like there's a lot more for me to explore in this story. I actually just published, or I had published the second story in this whole cycle with the Earth Warrior character. And that was actually published by DMR Books in their Swords of Steel omnibus. It's like an anthology of basically sword and sorcery stories told by heavy metal musicians. Speaking of niche things, there's a whole book of it.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I know there's an audience out there for that, but what I'm saying is, widespread, the general audience, the general population out there, it's maybe 1 out of 20 people who might dig that. You know what I'm saying? But, regardless of that, when you put this band together, what was your vision, as far as, maybe longevity, or maybe you weren't even think that far. Maybe you were just thinking, hey, I could jam with some guys that have the same kind of thought process or vision that I have, and we'll just see where it goes.
Yeah, putting the whole thing together really, I honestly, with the Mist of Time album, I never really expected for anyone to listen to it at all. I just wanted to make a record that I liked, and we were working at the time with Non Nobis Productions from Portugal on the release of that, and when it started gaining traction, it was kind of surprising to me. And then we played the Legions of Metal Festival in Chicago shortly thereafter, and yeah, but the original plan, like if I were to have set my goals at that very moment of starting it, it would have been just to be, big enough to justify producing our own T-shirt. I really didn't have any lofty expectations for it, so the fact that it's gotten this much further is kind of interesting and surprising in a lot of ways.
Right. Well, you're obviously a very talented musician in your own right. Obviously you play guitar and you play mandolin and you do the vocals, and you're a multi-talented musician. Where does your musical background come from?
I had learned piano originally when I was, I think, probably in like second or third grade, and that was all well and good. I really wanted to. I had a bit of an aptitude for playing music and learning songs by ear. I still don't actually read music. I just memorize everything. And so from that point, though, at that time as a kid, I was into the rock and roll tapes and records that my parents had. And so, I saw these cool pictures of these guys playing Fender Stratocaster guitars, and I thought that was the coolest thing in the world, being a kid. And so I wanted to learn to play guitar, and I took lessons all through like elementary school from that point, and basically kind of grew from there, just progressively more and more extreme styles of music. And then whenever things kind of topped out at the end of black metal's spectrum of extreme, then I kind of went back to more of the 70s prog that I had kind of skipped over, that I was didn't think was all that cool when I was in high school. And, now, so, I mean, really on a day-to-day basis, my influences come mostly from 70s progressive rock. I mean, I don't really listen to a whole lot of metal. I mean, just at the moment at least.
Sure, absolutely. Well, let's talk about your latest release here. You guys, obviously, you guys are self-financed, I'm going to assume, yeah?
To some degree. The High Roller Records has helped us in our kind of, recording and our music video endeavors and things like that. But we do a lot of things in-house. Really, like, it saves a lot of costs just for the fact that I'm also doing all the artworks and all the layouts and designs for the physical releases, a lot of the merchandising and stuff like that. So we save costs in some places, but where it becomes a bit more expensive, then we do have some support from the label.
Right. Absolutely. So you're kind of a one-man entity almost.
Well, I mean, the other guys in the band, they definitely contribute their parts, and being able to write with other musicians and kind of bounce ideas back and forth is really an invaluable kind of tool and asset that the band has.
Right. Well, we'll talk about the other guys in the band. Who's joining you in this band, and where do you know them from, and how did you guys come together?
Well, Kicker. I met him first working with our original bass player, Chew. None of us have grown-up names, by the way. And so essentially I was working with Chew on we were actually working in the direction of a first wave black metal style band, kind of like Celtic Frost. And Chew introduced me to Kicker as a drummer, and he just kind of stuck around. And, his playing is kind of unique because it's punk influence, jazz influence sort of stuff, with of course the metal thrown in, but the punk meets jazz sort of thing, and especially that you find on like a track like The Lost Road is something that's pretty unique to have him in the band. And so eventually, though, Chew had left the group, and Kicker introduced me to Evil St. Clair, who picked up the bass. He's actually really more of a guitar player than anything, and he picked up the bass kind of to fill in, actually, when we were booked for the Legions of Metal Festival. And he's stuck around since then, and that's kind of where we're at. Right.
Well, are you the chief songwriter, lyricist in this band, or is this a collective effort?
The music we write as a group, and then I'll take that idea home, and now that I'm writing the prose stories to go with the songs, then I'll go and take those riffs that we come up with and place the appropriate lyrics, based on the appropriate area of the story to kind of propel the story along. So I'm doing basically the lyricism, and I'm definitely writing the riffs and things too. But Evil St. Clair has provided some of the riffing as well, and Kicker will definitely come up with his own drum patterns, and we bounce ideas off of each other to get the actual completed song structures.
Right, absolutely. So when it comes to, and again, this is not a criticism, this is just a question. When it comes to being somewhat of a gimmicky band, and you obviously have your stage names and your images and all the things that go along with that. I'm good friends with Ralph Saenz, who's the lead vocalist of Steel Panther, and he's Michael Starr, and is that difficult to keep up that imagery, especially when you're out there at the live shows, I'm Vidarr, and it's rather than going by your given name.
Well, with my given, or with my stage name, it's something that I've used for many years, and honestly, more people know me as that than my actual given birth name. And with Kicker, for example, I didn't know his actual name until a few months after he joined the group. I just never asked him, and I just think he's always been Kicker.
Right.
So.
Sure. Now, how did you come up with the name Vidarr? What is that a reference to, or how did you land on that?
It's actually a name from Norse mythology. Vidar's. It would be Vidarr or Vidarr in correct pronunciation, but since we're just from Pittsburgh and all, it's just Vidarr. But so. This, it's the name of one of the deities who actually survives Ragnarok, the kind of Norse Armageddon battle at the end of the world. So he's one of the surviving gods, but he's the silent god, which is he like observes a ritual silence and basically kind of plotting revenge against the Fenris wolf who swallows Odin at the end of the world. So when the Fenris wolf swallows Odin, who represents the sun in this mythology, Vidarr rips the jaws of this giant wolf apart, and and ends the kind of the scourge of this beast on the world, and survives Ragnarok. And it's ironic that I'm a musician and the singer, and being named after the silent deity. It's kind of a bit of irony, but.
Well, yeah. You definitely got to be somewhat of a scholar to really get all that whole, put that whole thing together, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, the information now is much easier to come by. When I first started becoming interested in, mythology and studying kind of ancient histories and stuff like that, it was harder to find. You'd have to walk around a library for hours and find these old books. Just kind of the same way you would go to a record store and find something with the coolest looking band logo or the coolest album cover and, just take a guess that, yeah, this might be okay. And, but, nowadays there's, with the internet being so, comprehensive when it comes to information, you can find a lot of this stuff pretty, readily available. So, yeah, I mean, whenever I found the name, it was, fairly obscure. I guess it's still pretty obscure. It's not like Thor or Odin or one of the major deities that they have I don't know if it's Marvel or one of those comic book movies.
Right.
I don't really follow those.
Well, let me try to make you feel at home here. Yin's going downtown to the Smiling Moose to go see that Legendry band down there with that Vidarr.
Yeah, we have played the Smiling Moose quite a few times. we did actually play there with Manila Road a few years ago, which was fantastic for me to jam with those guys.
Sure.
But yeah,
I'm gonna go check out the Stillers, and then I'm gonna go down to the Smiling Moose and go see that Legendry.
Yeah,
you want to come?
I never realized how much of a Pittsburgh accent I had until I moved a little bit further away from it. Wait a second, I do sound like that. Oh, no.
Well, that's one of my favorite things about Pittsburgh is just that funny accent.
Oh, yeah. It's definitely its own little place in the world.
It definitely is.
Southside still reminds me of a Tom Waits album cover.
Right. Well, why don't you tell the fans a little more about your band? How did you come up with the name Legendry? I mean, that's people would want to say legendary, but I see it's Legendry. So where did that come from?
That comes directly from Robert E. Howard's essay on the Hyborian Age, where he basically lays out the different peoples and cultures of the world that he created. And I think it was in the phrase "myths of legendary." So legendary referring to basically a body of works, like a group of legends.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like a shortened contraction of legendary. It's a totally different word. Even though Google doesn't think it's a correct spelling, it is. And so I've run into that a few times where people have thought that we've changed the spelling of legendary, and it doesn't mean the same thing.
Sure, absolutely. Now, have you gotten interest? Now, this type of music and this format, more or less, seems to resonate more with the European market. So have you gotten any interest from, say, like European promoters or whatnot to be added to any of these, festival bills or, anything like that? I mean, because here in the States, people are a little more fickle. They're more mainstream. They don't really get into the, the niche genres, as it were. And, the European market seems to eat that thing kind of stuff up. So what's your response in the, over in Europe?
Definitely fairly strong. I think that a lot of the people that get into this type of music are based in Germany. The record label we're working with is in Germany as well. As far as the festivals, of course, we want to go over there and play some of those. It's a matter of finding the right one and the right opportunity. It's definitely not cheap to go over there, and due to kind of personal lives and professional lives, it's tricky to go over there and book a tour because that's the only way to make it financially feasible. I mean, you need to go over there and play one festival show and then come back. You have to be, maybe a bit on a different sort of plateau of statuses. It's not really a matter of being able to make it work.
Yeah, you don't want to have to mortgage the house or sell your car to just make that one show.
Right. It's not cheap to get over there, and that's why you see a lot of bands. They'll play a festival there, and then they'll play 4 or 5 other gigs in the other European countries or in the same country they played the festival in, and that's the way they make it work. And kind of like worth the travel and the expenditure to get over there. But definitely in the future, though.
All right. Well, in the overall scheme of things, where do you see the band Legendry going with your career? Are you happy with the level of success that you've had so far, or what do you envision for yourself down the road?
Really, it's something that's it is a labor of love. It's not a matter of being overly accepted or not. Like as we were discussing, it is a very niche sort of a genre. So it's not something that a lot of people are going to be into. It might be that they might grasp onto different things, like I was going to say earlier about the 70s prog angle that we kind of play. That might grab maybe more people, than say the fantasy lyrics. But in the future, though, I do want to push things further into the progressive route. I've actually already begun writing the next album, and as I said, I do have the next story arc already in place for the lyrics and the kind of the music to follow. So I think that the longer songs and the more musically explorative sort of things are where the band is the most successful. So I intend on kind of playing more to that direction. I'd really love to do something like Yes with Close to the Edge and have like a 20-minute song on one side of the LP and then a couple of like 10-minute songs on the other side.
Right.
Something like that.
Well, in this day and age where, album sales are basically nothing and they're the music business in general, there really is not a music business out there. What's your viewpoint on recording new music for release? I mean, I see you guys have gone as far as to release vinyl and obviously CD and MP3 and all.
Cassettes too.
Yeah, and cassettes too. So, when it comes to the whole physical product of releasing, your music, what's your viewpoint on that in all seriousness?
Well, the physical aspect of the release is always an important thing. I mean, as I was saying, I do all the cover paintings as well, and I paint them in a gatefold format. So, I mean, if you're just looking at the little Spotify icon, you're seeing only really half of the album covers. The other half is on the back side of the booklet or the back of the gatefold sleeve. And we did gatefold sleeves for both Dungeon Crawler and Mists of Time, which are a bit more expensive in the beginning, but it's something that it's a kind of a callback to when I was a little kid sitting on my parents' living room floor looking at the LPs and just kind of reading every word and, kind of looking at the whole thing. So it's the ritualistic aspect of physical media is something that's always, kind of a fascinating thing. I mean, just the kind of mildewy smell of old records is something that I think that a lot of people find comforting in a way.
Right.
Maybe not so healthy to inhale, but, and even cassettes have become really kind of a popular thing lately. We did a Dungeon Crawler cassette with Metal Strom recordings. They're kind of a smaller cassette and like patch labeled. They do some cool stuff though, and the sound of the cassette, I mean, is actually fairly great. I mean, the problem is that most people's memories of cassettes are lousy cassette decks in their car on a cassette that had been in the sun in the passenger seat for 6 months. It's that's why it sounded bad. I mean, they were listening to them on really bad, players or little boom boxes and stuff. So I mean, it's still, an analog medium. Where vinyl is kind of prohibitively expensive to a lot of bands. The cassette is kind of interesting, especially if you get an older cassette, that didn't get deteriorated and destroyed, like Yes or Black Sabbath or Led Zeppelin. Cassettes are going to sound pretty good because they're still analog music on analog media. There's no digital in the middle, depending on when they made the cassette, of course. But,
right. Of course. I've had plenty of them in my lifetime, so I'm well aware.
Yeah, I mean, some of them sound good, some sound terrible. I mean, there's also the ferric oxide, chromium oxide, and the metal tapes. There's different, grades of them. If you get, the metal tapes are the ones with, the chromium are the one with the black tape. The ferric are the red.
Right. Absolutely.
All right. Yeah, I'm definitely a total nerd about collecting those things. So,
and you hope that the fans that you gain have the same passion for the physical media that you do.
Yeah, and one thing about like this genre of epic metal, or some people are call it the new wave of traditional heavy metal, and it's a small audience, but it's a really hardcore audience. They buy everything. They support all the releases. It's definitely it's a small underground, but it's definitely it's doing some interesting things. There's a lot of bands that are, you go to buy their album on the day of release and it's sold out within a few minutes. It's that sort of situation for a lot of these groups, and we actually sold out of our LPs, the copies we had in around a week, actually. So,
very cool.
It's definitely there's there's a hardcore audience. It's small, but they're very supportive.
Sure, absolutely. Well, that's always good to have your hardcore fans.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
It amazes me, the stuff that they do. It's pretty cool.
Did Yins go down there to High Roller Records and pick up that new LP?
Or Dave's Music Mine. I don't know, I guess see if they have it.
All right, Vidarr. So what's in the works for 2020? We're coming down to the end of the year. So you got anything lined up for the new year?
At this time, it's really just down to writing the new record and getting things set up for doing that. I'm kind of shooting to record it maybe over the summer. Maybe as far as a year from now, it might take a while to write. But I'm focusing more on writing at this time, and hopefully some interesting live opportunities will show up. But just kind of remain to be seen at this point.
Sure,
nothing I can really divulge at this time. So
absolutely. All right. Well, where can people find out about Legendry?
Well, we have of course the Facebook, Instagram things, and you can find us on there pretty easily. The Bandcamp is our main sort of website at this time. It's just legendary.bandcamp.com, and the Instagram is legendary.epic.metal, and then Legendary Band at Facebook.
Perfect. All right, well, go check out Legendry and their latest release called The Wizard and the Tower Keep. And as a tradition here there, Vidarr, we always let the artist pick a song from their latest release and maybe tell us a story about it to take us out of the interview. What should we play?
Was there any time restraints on that one?
No, not at all.
Okay, well, my favorite track on the album is definitely Earth Warrior. I think it kind of pulls all the different sounds and styles that we perform together into one piece. It's 11 minutes, four movements, and it's kind of the epic finale where the unnamed warrior faces off finally with the evil wizard.
Perfect. All right. Well, the name of the band again is called Legendry, and the latest release is called The Wizard and the Tower Keep. So here it is. This is Earth Warrior exclusively here on Your Classic Metal Show.